Imagine a world where dozens of kingdoms tear each other apart for centuries, where generals sleep with one eye open, where children grow up learning the sounds of war before the sounds of laughter, where entire cities vanish overnight, burned to the ground by enemies who feel nothing beyond the logic of survival. This was China, before one man changed everything. Before one man looked at a fractured continent and decided, with absolute certainty, that it would all belong to him. His name was Ying. History would come to know him as Qin Shi Huang, the first sovereign emperor of all under heaven. Born in 259 BCE, his entry into the world was already wrapped in shadow. His father was the king of the Qin state, but rumors about his birth were dangerous. Some said his true father was a merchant named Lu Buwei, a man of staggering ambition who had allegedly arranged the union between his concubine and the Qin prince as a calculated political maneuver. Whether true or not, these whispers would follow Ying for the rest of his life, and he would spend that life making sure no one dared say them aloud. At 13 years old, he became king of Qin, an age when most boys were learning to ride horses. He was sitting on a throne with enemies circling it from every direction. He was young, but he was watching. He was learning. He was waiting. For nearly a decade, a regent ruled in his name. At 22, Ying seized full control, crushing a coup attempt with a coldness that made seasoned soldiers uncomfortable. He didn't just defeat his enemies, he erased them, and the world got its first glimpse of who this young king truly was. What followed was one of the most astonishing military campaigns in the ancient world. Over 17 years, his armies conquered every rival kingdom in their path: Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, Qi. One by one, they fell through relentless strategy, overwhelming force, and a burning will that seemed almost inhuman in its focus. For over 500 years, the Warring States period had bled China dry. Entire generations had known nothing but conflict. And then, in less than 2 decades, one man ended it all. In 221 BCE, he stood at the center of a unified China and declared himself something no one had ever declared before. He invented a new title, Huangdi, Emperor, the first of his kind. He called himself Qin Shi Huang, the first sovereign emperor of Qin. He standardized writing so every corner of his empire could communicate. He unified weights and measures. He built roads connecting lands that had never been connected. He imposed a single legal code across territories. Once governed by dozens of different systems, these were not the actions of a conqueror satisfied with conquest. These were the actions of a man building something meant to last forever, and that word, forever, was not a metaphor to him. It was a plan. He had unified the world. Now he wanted something no conqueror in history had ever obtained. He wanted to live forever. There is a particular madness that visits those who have achieved everything the world has to offer. Not the madness of failure or loss, but the madness of totality. The madness of a man who has climbed every mountain and still finds himself looking upward. Qin Shi Huang had conquered nations. He had silenced his enemies, but somewhere in his palace, in the hours before dawn when even emperors cannot sleep, a different kind of fear was growing. He was afraid of death, not in the vague way that ordinary men fear it. His fear was acute, consuming, and deeply personal. He had watched men die. He had ordered men to die. And the idea that all of this empire, this power, this legacy, could be extinguished by something as common as mortality was, to him, utterly unacceptable. So he began to reframe himself. He was not merely a man. He invoked ancient cosmic forces, the five elements, the mandate of heaven, the cyclical nature of power. He surrounded himself with rituals emphasizing his connection to something beyond the mortal world. His court encouraged it. His officials reinforced it. And slowly, the emperor began to believe what his court was telling him. He was chosen. He was different. And if he was different from other men, perhaps the final law of death did not have to apply to him. But belief alone was not enough. He needed evidence. He needed action. And so the alchemists arrived. In ancient China, the boundary between science and magic was not the clear line we imagine today. Scholars who studied herbs and minerals also studied the cosmos and invisible forces. The concept of an elixir, a substance that could extend life or grant immortality, was serious intellectual territory pursued by serious men. Qin Shi Huang gathered these men around him and funded their research with the wealth of an empire. He asked them the question burning inside him since the day he first understood how fragile power truly was. Is it possible to live? Here is where the story takes its first terrible turn. The alchemists, surrounded by the most powerful man alive and facing the implicit understanding that a wrong answer might cost them their lives, told him what he wanted to hear. Yes, they said, it is possible. There are islands far out in the eastern sea, islands where extraordinary beings walk in the mist. On these islands, the elixir exists. The secret to eternal life is waiting to be found. Qin Shi Huang listened, and then he did what he always did when confronted with a problem. He threw the full weight of his empire at it. He sent ships, real ships, filled with real people, dispatched into the open sea to search for islands that may or may not have existed. One expedition, led by a man named Shu Fu, reportedly included thousands of young men and women. A human investment so enormous it staggers the imagination. These were genuine imperial undertakings, funded at staggering cost, driven by an emperor's conviction that the answer to death was out there. Shu Fu sailed east. He sailed into the unknown. And then, he did not come back. The official story was that he had encountered obstacles at sea, but the darker interpretation, whispered among those who knew the court, was simpler. Shu Fu had realized the islands did not exist, and decided that whatever lay beyond the horizon was safer than returning to an emperor who did not accept failure. Some historians believe Shu Fu may have eventually landed in Japan, where local legends describe a man matching his description, arriving with a great fleet and never leaving. Whatever the truth, the man sent to find immortality vanished, and the emperor was left waiting. But Qin Shi Huang never waited passively. While his ships scoured the eastern seas, he kept the search burning on every front. He consulted oracles. He performed rituals. He had alchemists working day and night, grinding minerals, distilling liquids, attempting to crack the code of eternal life. The entire intellectual and financial machinery of the world's largest empire was aimed at one obsessive goal. Consider what this meant for the people living under his rule. The taxes funding these expeditions came from farmers. The labor building his walls came from conscripted men. The wealth flowing into his alchemical research was extracted from a population already bled thin by decades of war. He was not building an empire for the people. He was building an empire for himself. And in that distinction lies the seed of everything that would later collapse. His obsession was also reshaping his behavior in subtler, more dangerous ways. He had hundreds of passages built connecting his palace buildings so he could move without being seen. He never slept in the same room 2 nights in a row. He believed that if his location became known, malevolent forces could find him and cut short his life. Any official who revealed his whereabouts was executed. Think about what it means to live like that. To be the most powerful person on earth, and yet be so consumed by fear that you cannot sleep in the same bed twice. The emperor who had eliminated every human enemy had simply replaced them with an enemy he could not fight: his own mortality. He trusted fewer and fewer people. He saw betrayal in loyalty and conspiracy in silence. The court learned to tell him what he wanted to hear because survival ran through agreement, not truth. And it was exactly this palace of fear and flattery that would eventually destroy him. Here is one of history's most stunning ironies. Qin Shi Huang, in his desperate quest to defeat death, ended up engineering his own death with his own hands. Not at the hands of an assassin, not through battle, through Mercury. The alchemists of his court believed that Mercury, that strange silver liquid that behaves unlike any other substance, held the secret to immortality. They called it the essence of Yang, the embodiment of life energy. They mixed it into compounds, suspended it in solutions, and eventually began presenting it as something the emperor could consume. And he consumed it. Over a period of years, Qin Shi Huang ingested mercury-based compounds with the faith of a man who had decided the prize justified the cost. His alchemists told him the discomfort was the medicine working. They told him the strange sensations were signs of transformation. They told him he was becoming something more than human. What was actually happening was simpler and more brutal. Mercury accumulates in the body. It attacks the nervous system. It causes tremors, confusion, paranoia, and erratic behavior. In sufficient quantities over sufficient time, it kills. Many historians now believe that the increasingly erratic behavior of Qin Shi Huang in his later years, the intensified paranoia, the violent overreactions, the irrational decisions, were not simply expressions of a tyrant's psychology. They were symptoms of mercury poisoning. The substance he was taking to live forever was dismantling him from the inside out. And the cruelest detail? He likely felt at times that it was working. The strange sensations of mercury poisoning, the heightened awareness, the feverish energy before the collapse, could easily be mistaken by a man desperate to believe for the early signs of transcendence. He was dying and interpreting it as transformation. He was being consumed and calling it ascension. He died in 210 BCE during a tour of his empire. He was 49 years old. For a man who had staked everything on defeating death, 49 was a catastrophic failure. He died far from his capital, surrounded by officials who immediately recognized the dangerous opportunity his death presented. But before we reach that astonishing aftermath, we must understand another darkness at the heart of his reign, one so extreme and deliberate that it has echoed through centuries as a symbol of everything a ruler should never be. Power, once achieved, has a second problem: keeping it. You can conquer kingdoms with armies, but you cannot conquer ideas with armies. You cannot station soldiers inside a man's mind. Qin Shi Huang understood this deeply. The question was what to do about it. In 213 BCE, he issued one of the most disturbing orders in the history of civilization. He ordered the burning of books, not just a few dangerous texts, but the systematic destruction of an enormous portion of China's intellectual heritage. History books from rival states, works of philosophy, texts on poetry, music, and culture. Anything that preserved the memory of a world before his empire, anything that gave people a framework outside the one he was constructing, was to be destroyed. The reasoning was chillingly logical. If people could not read about how things had been done differently, they could not imagine things being done differently. If history began with Qin Shi Huang, there was no before, only the eternal now of his reign. Private book ownership became a crime. Scholars who refused to surrender their texts faced punishment. A narrow exemption existed for books on medicine and agriculture, because the emperor still needed functioning farmers and doctors. But the vast edifice of humanistic thought, centuries of philosophical debate and artistic creation, was to be turned to ash. And then came the scholars themselves. In 212 BCE, Qin Shi Huang discovered that a group of alchemists and scholars at his court, men he had trusted, men he had funded, had been speaking critically of him in private. They had doubted his methods. They had questioned his judgment. They had said, behind closed doors, what everyone was thinking but no one dared say aloud. His response was to have over 400 of them buried alive. 400 scholars buried alive. This was not a battlefield execution. This was a deliberate act of terror, designed to send an unmistakable message to every intellectual in his empire. Thought itself was dangerous. Doubt was a crime. Private dissent was punishable by the most brutal death imaginable. But here is the twist that history rarely emphasizes. Not everything was destroyed. Some books were hidden. Some scholars survived by memorizing texts they could no longer keep openly. And by trying to destroy history, Qin Shi Huang actually branded it more deeply into human memory. The act of burning became the most remembered history of all. And yet, even while he burned the world above ground, he was building something extraordinary beneath it. While the living trembled, the dead were being prepared for something magnificent. Construction on Qin Shi Huang's tomb began before he was 20 years old. This was not unusual for rulers of his era. But what he was building was not a tomb. It was a world. The project consumed hundreds of thousands of workers over its decades of construction. Some were convicts, some were conscripts. Many brought specialized skills to different corners of the work, and according to ancient sources, many of them never left. The historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death, described what lay beneath the earth in terms that read almost like mythology. He wrote of rivers of Mercury flowing through underground channels, simulating the great rivers of China. He described ceilings embedded with precious stones arranged to represent the night sky. He described mechanical crossbows, automatically triggered, designed to kill any unauthorized intruder. He described treasures beyond counting, accumulated from every corner of an empire that spanned the known world. And then there was the Terracotta army. More than 8,000 individual clay soldiers, each unique in facial features, expression, and posture. Cavalry units with horses, archers in formation, infantry soldiers at attention. Generals with the bearing of men who had commanded real armies on real battlefields. The entire military force of the first emperor, rendered in clay and arranged in underground chambers as if waiting for an order that would never come. When these figures were first discovered by farmers digging a well in 1974, the world stopped. Not just because of the artistic achievement, though that alone was extraordinary, but because of what it revealed about the mind of the man who ordered their creation. He was not simply preparing for death. He was refusing to acknowledge its meaning. He was building an afterlife as powerful as his living empire, because some part of him could not accept that the story would end. He had warriors to guard him. He had rivers to flow around him. He had stars above him. He had replicated the entire symbolic architecture of his earthly power, not as a prayer, but as an expectation. He expected to continue ruling, and it raises a question that still has no answer. What else is in there, sealed in the dark? He died somewhere on the road. The historical consensus places his death in July of 210 BCE, during his 5th imperial tour, a journey taken partly as a display of power and partly always in the hope of encountering another sage with an answer to the question he could never stop asking. Only a handful of people were present, among them Zhao Gao, the chief eunuch and a man of extraordinary cunning, and Li Si, the chancellor who had served the emperor for decades. What they understood in those first moments was terrifying. The emperor had died far from his capital. His eldest son, Fusu, the legitimate heir, was stationed hundreds of miles away, and Fusu was not here. Zhao Gao and Li Si looked at each other across the body of the man who had defined both their lives, and they made a decision that stands as one of the most audacious acts of political manipulation in recorded history. They kept the emperor's death a secret. The body was placed in the imperial carriage, sealed and guarded, exactly as it had always been. The procession continued its route. Meals were delivered at proper times, as though the emperor were eating. Officials brought documents for review, as though he were reading them. Zhao Gao handled the responses, forging the imperial will with a skill that suggested this was not entirely new territory for him. But the summer heat was brutal, and a corpse, even an imperial one, obeys natural law. According to historical accounts, Zhao Gao ordered carts of salted fish to travel alongside the imperial carriage, the strong smell masking what was happening inside. The first emperor of China, the man who had attempted to conquer death itself, was decomposing in a sealed cart surrounded by fish, while his handlers steered his legacy toward their own ends. They fabricated an imperial edict ordering Fusu, the rightful heir, to commit suicide. And Fusu, thousands of miles away with no way to verify its authenticity, obeyed. He died by his own hand, believing it was his father's final command. Zhao Guo then elevated the youngest son, Hu Hai, to the throne, a young man he believed he could control. The second emperor of China was a puppet, and the man pulling the strings had engineered everything with nothing more than a forged document and a cart of fish. The empire that Qin Shi Huang had built with 17 years of relentless military campaign began to come apart almost immediately. Rebellions erupted across the territories. Within 4 years of the first emperor's death, the Qin dynasty, the dynasty meant to last 10,000 generations, was gone. And so we arrive at the great paradox at the heart of Qin Shi Huang's story. A man who wanted to live forever died at 49. A man who wanted his dynasty to outlast time watched it collapse within a decade of his death. A man who consumed poison daily in the belief it was medicine. A man who burned knowledge in the belief it would protect power. Every strategy he employed to preserve himself became an instrument of his destruction. But here is a twist that history has buried quietly, and that deserves to be spoken clearly. In the most unexpected way imaginable, Qin Shi Huang did achieve a form of immortality, not the kind he wanted, not the kind his alchemists promised, but something arguably more durable. He became unforgettable. Every unified Chinese state that followed the Qin dynasty was built on the framework he created. The concept of a unified China governed by a single central authority is a Qin invention. The very word China is believed by many scholars to derive from Qin. The standardization of writing, the concept of a centralized imperial bureaucracy, the road networks tying distant territories together. All of these outlived the dynasty by thousands of years. When we look at any map of China across the past 2 millennia, we are looking at the ghost of Qin Shi Huang's ambition made permanent by the civilization that eventually rejected him. He wanted to be remembered as a god. He ended up remembered as something more complicated. The man who showed what was both magnificent and monstrous about concentrated power. His name became shorthand for tyranny and overreach, for the cost of unchecked ambition. And in that notoriety, he lives in every classroom, every history book, every conversation about what power does to the human soul. But this is not the immortality he was seeking. What he truly wanted was presence, continuation. He wanted to feel the morning. He wanted to issue orders and watch them ripple across his empire. He wanted, above everything, to not be absent. The Mercury denied him that. His trust in men who told him what he wanted to hear denied him that. His inability to accept the basic human condition denied him that. Because the thing about immortality is not merely that it is medically unattainable, it is that the pursuit of it, conducted with singular obsession, tends to destroy the very life it is trying to preserve. He spent his living years preparing for a death he could not prevent. His resources on expeditions to islands that did not exist, and his court's intellectual energy on alchemical fantasies rather than governance. The dynasty collapsed so quickly after his death that the whole structure appears to have been held together by one man's will. And without that will, it had nothing left. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang sits beneath a large earthen mound near the city of Xi'an in Shanxi province. From a distance, it looks almost like a natural hill, which is exactly what the builders intended, visible enough to command respect, concealed enough to protect what lies inside. Over 2,000 years of weather and time have softened its edges, blanketed it in grass, and given it the deceptive appearance of something ordinary. But what lies beneath has been one of the most tantalizing mysteries in the history of archaeology. The Terracotta army, discovered in 1974, is only the beginning. The thousands of soldiers in their burial pits are actually located outside the main tomb complex. They are the outer guard, the perimeter defense. The innermost chamber itself has never been excavated. It has never been opened. After more than 2,000 years, the most powerful man in ancient Chinese history rests in a chamber that no modern eye has ever seen. There are reasons for this beyond politics. The ancient sources describe the interior in terms that make archaeologists simultaneously excited and deeply cautious. The Mercury rivers Sima Qian described are not merely mythological. Soil samples from around the burial mound have revealed mercury levels dramatically higher than the surrounding Earth, levels consistent with the presence of a significant volume of liquid mercury within the sealed chamber. Whatever is inside, some version of the ancient description appears to be true. Mercury vapor is lethal. The structural integrity of a 2,000-year-old underground chamber is unpredictable, and the irreversible nature of excavation, the fact that you can only open a sealed chamber once, and that doing it wrong means losing forever what you hope to find, has kept the world's greatest undiscovered archaeological treasure locked beneath the earth. Modern, non-invasive scanning technologies have begun to map what lies beneath, and the results suggest staggering complexity. A large central chamber, corridors, multiple sealed rooms, artifacts almost certainly preserved in quantities and conditions that would make the Terracotta army look like a prologue. Silk, lacquer, bronze, jade, materials requiring extraordinarily controlled extraction to survive the transition from burial environment to open air. The Chinese government has expressed intentions to eventually open the tomb, but the decision carries a weight that extends beyond archaeology into the symbolic and the sacred. This is the resting place of the man who unified China. Opening it is not a simple act, and so the emperor waits. He has been waiting for more than 2,000 years, surrounded by the underground empire he built for himself, the rivers and stars, and the army of clay soldiers keeping silent vigil in the dark. He wanted to rule forever. He wanted to never stop. And in the silence beneath that grass-covered hill, in the sealed rooms the world has not yet entered, there is a version of that wish that has quietly, strangely, almost been granted. Not because he is alive, but because the story of what he was, and what he built, and what he feared, and what he destroyed in pursuit of something impossible, that story refuses to end. Every generation rediscovers him. Every generation looks at the clay soldiers and the Mercury rivers and the burned books and finds something new to understand about power and mortality, about ambition and destruction, about the human need to leave something behind, and the cost of carrying that need too far. He wanted to live forever. He settled, without knowing it, for something less complete but no less permanent. He became the kind of story that people cannot stop telling, the kind of mystery the world has not yet finished excavating, the kind of question, what is truly inside that tomb that hangs unanswered above a hill in Shanxi province, waiting for the day when someone finally decides the world is ready to know. That day has not yet come. The tomb has not been opened, and somewhere below the grass and the soil and the mercury and 2,000 years of silence, the first man to call himself emperor of all under heaven is still there, still waiting in his way for whatever comes next.